Hello and welcome to Life Reviewed. This is episode 5 and part 5 of my Planet of the Apes retrospective. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Battle for the Planet of the Apes, the fifth and final film in the original Planet of the Apes saga. Battle for the Planet of the Apes was released in 1973. It was directed by J. Lee Thompson, the same director from Conquest, and written by Paul Dean. It stars Roddy McDowall as Caesar, Claude Akins as General Aldo, Natalie Trundy returning again as Lisa, Severn Darden returning again as now Governor Culp, and Paul Williams as Virgil. And there is a bunch of other actors who play apes in this movie. There's a lot of ape characters in this film. But let's jump into the plot. Told as a flashback to the early 21st century, with a wraparound sequence narrated by the orangutan, the Lawgiver, in North America 2670 AD, this sequel follows the ape leader Caesar years after a global nuclear war has destroyed civilization. In this post-nuclear society, Caesar tries to cultivate peace between the apes and the surviving humans. A guerrilla general named Aldo, however, opposes this and plots Caesar's downfall. Caesar is married to Lisa, the female ape of the previous film, and they have a son named Cornelius, in honor of Caesar's father. Caesar regrets never having known his parents until his human assistant MacDonald tells him about an archive film of his parents where he can also learn about the future. The archives are located in the Forbidden City, now a radioactive ruin. After obtaining a Geiger counter and weapons from the armory, Caesar travels with MacDonald and orangutan Virgil to the Forbidden City and sneaks in to find the archives. However, there are mutants, radiation-scarred humans, still living there under the command of Governor Culp. Caesar and his party view the recordings of Cornelius and Zira and learn about the future of the world, but barely have time to study the tapes before they have to escape being captured. Caesar assembles a meeting to report his discoveries at the Forbidden City. Aldo objects when some humans show up, and he leads the guerrillas away. A team of scouts sent by Governor Culp return and tell him about the Ape City. Culp considers this covert trip by Caesar an act of espionage. His assistant, Mendez, believes they did nothing wrong and should be left alone, but Governor Culp stubbornly declares war on Ape City, mustering the mutant humans to destroy the ape society. Aldo is furious that Caesar wants to coexist peacefully with humans and plots a coup d'etat in order to become the ape leader himself. Cornelius overhears this while trying to catch his escaped pet squirrel in a nearby tree. Aldo spots him and hacks the tree branch down, critically injuring Cornelius. After a guerrilla scouting pair is attacked by the approaching humans, though the guerrillas struck the first blow, in this case, by killing a human scout beforehand, Aldo orders all humans to be corralled and leads the guerrillas to loot the weapons armory, much to Virgil's dismay. Cornelius eventually dies from his wounds, leaving Caesar devastated, but not without leaving him with a warning about Aldo's coup. It is at that moment that Culp's ragtag force launches their attack against Ape City. The initial mutant attack succeeds, forcing Caesar to order the defenders to fall back. When Culp finds Caesar lying among dozens of apes, he threatens to kill him, but the fallen apes, who are feigning death or hiding on Caesar's orders, launch a counterattack that captures most of the mutants. Culp and his remaining forces are killed by Aldo's troops while attempting to retreat. After the battle, Aldo wants to kill the penned humans, but Caesar shields them. Aldo declares that Caesar should be killed if he shields the humans. However, Virgil reveals Aldo's responsibility for Cornelius' death and the breaking of the apes community's most sacred law, ape shall never kill ape. An infuriated Caesar pursues Aldo up a large tree, resulting in Aldo falling to his death during the fight. Caesar then attempts to free the humans, but they refuse to leave the pens unless humans are treated as equals. Caesar then realizes the apes are just as despicable as their former slave owners. The apes and humans then decide to coexist with one another and begin a new society. They store their guns back in the armory, though some want them destroyed. And Caesar and Virgil reluctantly agree that the danger of a future conflict when they will need them has not passed, and they will just have to wait for the day when they don't need their weapons anymore. The Lawgiver finishes this wraparound narration saying that it's been over 600 years since Caesar's death. It's revealed he's talking to a group of young humans and apes. Apes and humans have continued to coexist in peace. The Lawgiver notes that they still wait for the day when the world will not need weapons, but at least now we wait with hope. When asked by a human child, "Who knows the future?" the Lawgiver replies, "Perhaps only the dead. A close-up of the statue of Caesar shows a single tear falling from one eye. And this is another movie that has an extended cut, which is nice because this is the version they actually show on TV, the extended cut that the scene with the scenes that were cut from the theatrical release, and it is the version that is on the Blu-ray box set as well. And so there's a bunch of deleted scenes and extra scenes from the battle that were added back in, but the most notable scene and the one that really is important for the rest of the franchise is the final scene with Mendez, a name you may remember from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Mendez has become the new governor and talks the mutant lieutenant out of firing the atomic missile. As they argue, they discover it is the Alpha Omega bomb from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. So there's a close-up and you see it has the Alpha Omega symbol on it. And basically Mendez is the name of the leader from Beneath, so this could be his ancestor, or everything's been sped up in the timeline, especially if you're going off of an alternate timeline, which is the one I believe to be true. This could be Mendez, or this could be an ancestor of the Mendez we saw in Beneath. So the big difference between this film and the previous four is budgetary restraints. It only costs $1.7 million to make, and the director was not happy about the reduced budget. And it shows. The sets are far inferior to what we've seen before. It only takes place in a couple of small sets. The ape makeup is notably the quality is notably reduced, especially from what we've been used to. And you can see. I guess they were gearing up for the television show the next year, and they did this sort of with the same budgetary ideas of television. It actually does feel more like a television special than a full-out feature film. And $1.7 million is minuscule for a big series-ending finale like this film. And so right away, as you see the quality of the costumes have been reduced and the makeup, it does pull you out of it. There's no denying that this is the weakest of the first five films. Some people have tried to say that Beneath is worse than this film. I think that's preposterous. I think this movie obviously shows a series that's wrapping up, and they're just trying to push out one more movie before they start their TV series, which is really a shame, because if this film was better, the first five Planet of the Apes movies I think might be held in really, really high esteem for just being an excellent franchise beginning to end. But because Battle is such a weak film to end the original five-movie run on, I don't think it gets the credit that it deserves. So this is definitely, without a doubt, the weakest of the first five films. I failed to mention John Huston, who plays the lawgiver in the opening and closing scenes. He has that amazing voice that I recognized right away as the voice of Gandalf in the original animated Hobbit and Lord of the Rings Rankin and Bass films. He's just got this powerful voice, and it's great to see the lawgiver, instituted. We see statues of him in the original films, but it's great to see him talk and speak about, as he's giving the laws to children at the end and kind of talking about the history of the Planet of the Apes. I think that was a really good decision to open it that way. Unfortunately, they do this flashback thing for the beginning where it shows pieces of the previous films, and I just feel like it goes on too long, especially watching these films in order. It's really like unnecessary, but I understand them showing a little bit to sort of catch people up to where we are in the timeline. The most interesting part of this movie is probably Aldo. So Aldo is not a new name. Aldo is the name that Cornelius gave when he was telling his testimony back in Escape. He was telling the committee about the history of how apes took over. And he tells the story, and in that story, in the original timeline, it's an ape called Aldo that's the first one to speak and say no to his master, and he leads the rebellion that leads to the apes taking over. And so this is probably the most important thing when discussing timeline, because obviously in once time has changed, once Cornelius and Zero come back to the past and bring their baby with them, and Caesar grows up, Caesar becomes the Aldo role, and then Aldo shows up here to fight Caesar on it. And I actually do like that decision from a story standpoint, that, in the original timeline, here's Aldo, starting the rebellion against the humans. In the new timeline, Caesar, does it, but ends up being more merciful to humans than Aldo might have been. And the original timeline, Aldo hated humans and they took over, and then you have the original Planet of the Apes where they're hunting humans. And then in the new timeline, you have Caesar take over. He's more sympathetic. He wants to live in harmony with humans. And here we see the lawgiver, 600 years in the future, that's still happening. And Aldo shows up in this, still hating humans and wanting to kill all the humans, and instead of being able to take out his aggression on just the humans, he ends up taking it out on Caesar. So on paper, I think that the concept to kind of bring these two timelines together was fantastic. It's technical execution where this film falls apart, and like I said, it's pretty poorly put together. It just looks like a television special, and that's not to bash, because when I get to the live action TV show, I've watched part of it. I'm working my way through it, but so far I have really positive opinions of the television special. But it's certain expectations that when you're watching TV, you're watching something lower budget. The costumes, the expectation are that they're not going to be as high quality as you would see in a feature film, and so Battle sort of sets that expectation for the TV show, but I don't know that audiences and critics were really expecting that when they went in. So it's not a huge sticking point. I know I've brought it up a couple of times, but it doesn't, like, you can get past it, and you could definitely get past it if the screenplay was better, but it's noticeable based on just the quality we've seen in the previous 4 films. The screenplay itself is definitely weaker overall, and I guess they were kind of rushing to get the screenplay out, and they had signed on. They were writing the screenplay based around what they could do with a budget, and so that's not the best process that that's not the best process for writing creatively. So you can see that in some of the scenes, and some of the dialogue is really hard to understand. I had to put subtitles on because they're sort of mumbling through their costumes, and I don't know if it's ADR work that they just didn't do right or what, but there are like some lines where I could not understand what they are saying, and I had to put the subtitles on, and I couldn't even believe that what the subtitles said is what they actually said because it was so muffled. Cornelius, it's nice to see that Caesar named his son Cornelius. This is not going to grow up to be the Cornelius for people who think this is a cyclical timeline. This is not going to grow up to be, this Cornelius is not going to grow up to be, the Cornelius of the future. It's just in name only. And obviously he's not going to grow up to be anyone because he's killed. And not to get into too, if you haven't seen War for the Planet of the Apes, you may not want to listen to this part, especially if you're listening to it while it's still in theatrical release. But here's some spoilers for War of the Planet of the Apes. This plot point is reused in War for the Planet of the Apes, where Caesar's son is killed, and he goes like crazy with rage because of it. And also, this film is heavily influenced on Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, where Koba is basically playing the Aldo role. And so while those films are far superior to this one, you can see where this did act as a blueprint for, just like Conquest did for Rise, where battle is sort of dawn and war in the new franchise. And so, there are some good things to say about it. I do like the way that Aldo leads the guerrillas, and, it's very much in line with that caste system we've seen where the guerrillas are the militants and the police, and that didn't change in the altered timeline. Everyone still, has that same role. So let's talk about the mutants a little bit. It's nice to see Severin Darden back as Culp. He's now the governor, and he's seen what Caesar did and when he took over and how he took over, and so he hates the apes, and yeah, they're starting to show the signs of the mutation that we saw in Beneath by living in the radiated city. And there's a pretty good action scene when they're trying to chase the apes out of there, and with a lot of gunfire. It's a good break in the middle of the film with some good action. But then, he puts together his kind of ragtag group. It looks a little bit like a Mad Max film when they roll up with their kind of crazy outfits on and crazy vehicles. And then the final battle is pretty forgettable. There's just a bunch of explosions. There's no real actual combat that feel like stimulating combat. It's nothing like the end of Conquest. You would imagine that they would have gone all out. And, you don't need great costumes and makeup to have good choreography. And they could have had some good, hardcore fighting, and they did it in the previous film. I don't understand why the battle just feels anticlimactic. There's some cool scenes with Aldo and his guerrilla troops fighting them, but overall the final battle is pretty forgettable. And then, again, Caesar kind of switches his mentality around quite a bit when, he says, ape shall not kill ape is the big rule, and then he finds out Aldo killed his son, and immediately Caesar goes and it tries to chase Aldo down to kill him, which of course he falls to his death, and it's sort of a cop-out, he killed him, sort of, but he didn't actually, strike the killing blow himself, so he kind of gets away with it. And then it just kind of ends, and it just kind of shows a new world where apes and humans are living peacefully together, at least at 2670 AD, which is still a 1300 years before Taylor was set to arrive. If you believe that this is just a continuing timeline, which there's I guess a theory that it could be going around in a circle, and that Taylor's going to arrive again and things are going to get off kind of to the same foot, but who knows. So unfortunately, the original 5 films does end on this down note. But I do want to stress that, while this is a weaker entry, the original 5 films as a whole, the average is pretty strong. I highly recommend this entire franchise. I think it sets up an awesome world to play in, which we'll see, in future films and the TV show and supplemental materials like novels. So my review for Battle for the Planet of the Apes, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I think it's very, very average. There's still some good stuff. It's still got Roddy McDowell. It's still got Caesar. And the continuity is actually fine with what we've seen before, and I like that they tie it back to Beneath. But overall, the film is pretty dull. The writing is cringeworthy at times, and it's, without a question, the weakest film in the original 5 movies. So this concludes my Battle for the Planet of the Apes review. Up next, we are jumping many, many years in the future to 2001 with the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes reimagining. This is a film that I saw in theaters when I was growing up, and one that I hadn't watched in many, many years, and went back to just recently for this review. So thank you for listening to Life Reviewed. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Feedback is always appreciated, and I'll see you next time.